The Sacramento Northern Railway was an 183-mile electric interurban railway that connected Chico in Northern California with Oakland via the California capital, Sacramento. In its operation it ran directly on the streets of Oakland, Sacramento, Yuba City, Chico, and Woodland, and ran passenger service until 1941 and freight service into the 1960s. History. Summary. The Sacramento Northern was an electrified interurban railroad in California that extended 183 miles from Oakland north to Chico. There were two branches, one to Woodland, Colusa, and the other to Oroville. The SN had been two separate interurban companies connecting at Sacramento until 1925. The Oakland, Antioch, and Eastern Railway was a trolley wire-powered line that ran from Oakland through a tunnel in the Oakland Hills to Moraga, Walnut Creek, Concord, Pittsburgh, to Sacramento. It was renamed the San Francisco-Sacramento Railroad briefly. The Northern Electric Railway was a third rail-powered line that ran from Sacramento north through Marysville, Yuba City to Chico. The train crossed the Template Sacramento River on the Red Gate Bridge. It was renamed the Sacramento Northern Railroad in 1914. In 1928, the two lines combined to become the Sacramento Northern Railway and came under control of the Western Pacific Railroad, which operated it as a separate entity. An extensive multiple-car passenger service operated from Oakland to Chico until 1941, including providing dining car service on some trains. Passenger traffic was heaviest from Sacramento to Oakland. Freight operation using electric locomotives continued into the 1960s. The SN was a typical interurban in that its trains, including freight, ran on downtown city streets in Oakland, Sacramento, Yuba City, and Woodland. This involved multiple car trains making sharp turns at street corners and obeying traffic signals. Once in open country, SN's passenger trains ran at fairly fast speeds. With its shorter route and lower fares, the SN provided strong competition to the Southern Pacific and Western Pacific Railroads for passenger business and minor freight business between those two cities. North of Sacramento, rail business was less due to the small-town agricultural nature of the region with its small towns and by competition from the SP Railroad. Detailed history. The original 93-mile route connected Chico with Sacramento. The original name of this line was the Chico Electric Railway, in operation from 1904 to 1905. CERY was sold in 1905, after a few months of operation, to the Northern Electric Railway. The NER went into bankruptcy in 1914, and was acquired by a new corporation named the Sacramento Northern Railroad. The Western Pacific Railroad purchased the SNR in 1922 as a subsidiary and kept the original name. In 1925 the WP created a new Sacramento Northern Railway in order to group the growing collection of WP interurban railroad holdings. The Sacramento Northern Railway was created from two interurban railroads. Northern Electric Railway, the third rail-powered north end, from Sacramento north through the agricultural Sacramento Valley to Marysville, Yuba City and Chico from late 1905 to 1918. It became the northern division of the SNRY, San Francisco-Sacramento Railroad. The trolley wire-powered south end operated from Sacramento south through farmland, marshes, over a bay by its owned ferry, to Pittsburgh, Concord, through the Contra Costa County hills and tunnel to Oakland and the Key System Ferry Pier. In 1928 the San Francisco-Sacramento Railroad became the southern division of the SNRY. by retaining the Sacramento Northern Railway as a subsidiary rather than just absorbing it into the Western Pacific Railroad. The WP earned more income by interchanging freight with a separate Sacramento Northern Railroad due to extra fees earned from shipper customers by interchanging freight from one railroad to another. Western Pacific also owned regional sister electric railroads, the Tidewater Southern Railway and the Central California Traction Company. The TS and the circuit used the same downtown Sacramento terminal and ran directly on Sacramento streets. The two divisions used different voltages as well as different methods of current collection. Thus, only some powered equipment could traverse the entire Chico to Oakland route. When in Oakland, SN used key system power. Some equipment carried a third rail shoe, a trolley pole, and a pantograph. The differing electrical systems, third rail from the north end and trolley wire for the south end, were retained. Some passenger interurban cars and freight locomotives were designed to operate on both ends, but most could not and had to remain on the home divisions. The combined main line extended for 183 miles between San Francisco and Chico. At the southern end, the SNRY shared track, electric propulsion power, and facilities of the East Bay's expansive Key System commuter lines. At first this used the Key System's Ferry terminal at the Oakland Mall in West Oakland. Then, beginning in 1939, it used the tracked lower deck of the San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge into the Transbay Terminal in San Francisco. After 1958, the Key System ceased operating, and the tracks were removed from streets and the Bay Bridge. Service in June 1939, SN had 3 weekday trains from Chico to San Francisco, 1 Sacramento train to SF and 3 Concord to SF trains. The fastest train took 5 hours 43 minutes Chico to San Francisco and 2 hours 48 minutes Sacramento to SF. Passenger service west from Sacramento ended in August 1940. In January 1941, SN operated 2 weekday trains from Pittsburgh to San Francisco and 2 Concord trains to SF. Passenger service totally ended in 1941, and SN was a short-line freight hauling railroad thereafter. At 183 miles, the SN was one of the longest interurban lines in the nation and was built and operated to first-class railroad standards, including dining and parlor car service at speeds up to 60 miles per hour. As with most interurban railroads in the U.S., its return on initial investment was lower and its annual operating costs were higher than had been projected at conception. Interurbans, like most railroads, were more labor-intensive than expected in shops maintaining the rolling stock and repairing electrical systems. Passenger business was less than projected and became increasingly unprofitable, even after SN reached downtown San Francisco via the new San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge in 1939. Its freight business and its relationship with the adjacent Western Pacific Railroad was the lifeblood of the railroad, keeping it in profit long after passenger service had ceased. Although it had a somewhat shorter route from Oakland to Pittsburgh, Antioch, in competing with the Santa Fe and Southern Pacific steam railroads, its route through the Oakland Hills was steep and curvy by railroad standards, plus it had on-street operation in Oakland. Freight trains usually had just a few cars on those grades with locomotives at both ends of the train. From Sacramento north to Chico, the SN competed with the Southern Pacific Railroad and, up to 1922, with the Western Pacific from Marysville south. It traversed a low-density population rural farm country from Chico, which contained only Marysville, Yuba City as major towns before it reaching Sacramento. Thus, passenger business north of Sacramento was light and could not be expected to increase. The SN had branches to Vacaville and Dixon, Woodland, Marysville and Colusa, and Oroville. The railway suffered from the Great Depression and the rise of the automobile. Interurban passenger service ended in 1941, while streetcar service in Chico continued until 1947. Other travails were the 1951 Lisbon trestle collapse, in which crewmen were hurt and a long causeway trestle needing rebuilding, and the withdrawal of the Sacramento Northern's aging train ferry, ram-on, and service on the Dixon branch. Freight service continued and was heavy during World War II. In 1956, SN reported 45 million ton-miles of revenue freight. At the end of the year it operated 349 miles of road and 452 miles of track. 1956 operating revenue was $2.2 million, but in that year ICC included SN among the classes. In 1944 the railroad received its first diesel locomotives, which began the process of electrification. All electric operations ceased in 1965, after which the railway operated as a minor freight subsidiary of the Western Pacific. Trackage was abandoned over the years, especially that which duplicated routes on other railroads. The SN name ceased to exist with the WP's acquisition by the Union Pacific in 1983. SN's seniority list continued and is still in use by the Union Pacific, although it is doubtful that many former WP-SN employees remain today. The SN line connecting the present-day ghost towns of Montezuma, Dozier, and Cannon in Solano County is now owned and operated by the Western Railway Museum as a heritage railway. Much of the SN's former equipment is part of the museum's permanent collection. Timeline: 1905 – The Northern Electric Railway is incorporated. Constructs an electrified railroad from Chico to Sacramento. Ferry also purchases the Chico Electric Railway. 1913 – Oakland, Antioch and Eastern is incorporated. Construction begins on an electrified railroad from Oakland to Sacramento. 1918 – Ferry is purchased by new investors and renamed Sacramento Northern Railroad. 1920 – Oakland, Antioch and Eastern renamed the San Francisco-Sacramento Railroad. 1922 – SN acquired by Western Pacific and becomes a subsidiary. This does not yet include the SFS. 1925 – New Sacramento Union Station constructed for local Interurbans SN-SFS circuit. The Sacramento Northern Railway is also incorporated and purchases the SNR on November 4 under WP ownership. 1928 – SN acquires SFS, and the entire Chico-Oakland route and branches is now the Sacramento Northern Railway, a WP subsidiary. 1939 – SN service begins over the New Bay Bridge from Oakland into downtown San Francisco. 1941 – Passenger service ends. 1954 – Sweetwater Bay Ferry ram-on at Pittsburgh quits. SN, WP arrange freight connection from Sacramento through Stockton to Pittsburgh and Concord shippers via Santa Fe. 1994 – Oakland Hills Shepherd Canyon Tunnel portal graded and fill. Route Oakland to Sacramento. Although the SN's Oakland yard at 40th and Shafter was the end of its right-of-way, its trains continued west along 40th Street, on the tracks of the Key System and onto the Key System's mole. In later years, the trains ran over the San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge, which was built near the site of the the Oakland Mall Pier, to San Francisco's downtown Transbay Terminal, connecting by way of the Keys tracks on Yerba Buena Avenue and 40th Street. This service ended with the railroad's passenger service in 1941, but freight interchange with the Key system continued until that system's demise. The terminus of the SN's right-of-way in Oakland was a compact yard on the corner of 40th Street and Shafter Avenue. The main line ran on single track north up the center of Shafter Avenue in a residential area, passing Emerson Elementary School at 49th Street. At the end of Shafter, the track crossed College Avenue next to Claremont Junior High School and started a long curving 4% grade into the Oakland Hills in the Rock Ridge district of Oakland. It then skirted Lake Temescal on its eastern shore and ran southeast through the Montclair district of Oakland. It crossed into Montclair over a trestle at Moraga Avenue and Thornhill Drive, then ran along a high berm between Montclair Recreation Center and Montclair Elementary School, before crossing Mountain Boulevard and Snake Road via Trestle. High above the northwest side of Shepherd Canyon, the line headed east, then made a sharp turn northeast as it passed through a major cut in the hill. It then climbed up Shepherd Canyon to a station called Havens at Paso Robles Drive, named for real estate developer Frank C. Havens, one-time partner of the Key System's Borax Smith, who was trying to encourage sales in Shepherd Canyon. At Havens, below Cerrone Drive, the line entered a short ravine leading to the entrance of a 1-mile-long single-track tunnel under the Oakland Hills. The tunnel itself is still intact but is sealed at both ends. In 1994, home developers filled in the approach ravine and tunnel mouth and constructed residential homes on this fill and on top of the tunnel. The upper foot of the top of the tunnel portal could be observed in the backyard of one of the new homes. A home further northeast behind the first was constructed on top of the inline tunnel, and by altering drainage in the area caused the tunnel below the home to slowly subside. The home shifted and dropped and had to be removed. The SN track exited the tunnel into Contra Costa County at Pinehurst Road near Huckleberry Botanic Regional Preserve, and immediately curved over a bridge over Pinehurst Road to run southeastward through Redwood Canyon. The railroad designated a station just outside the tunnel portal as Eastport. The tunnel portal is no longer visible, largely as a result of a landslide which occurred during the El Niño rains of the early 1980s. The right-of-way ran along an extant fire trail near the spot where Pinehurst Road makes a sharp U-turn. This fire trail was previously known as Winding Way on some maps, and was originally an old 19th-century logging road built by Hiram Thorne, bringing redwood logs out of the Moraga redwoods into his mill, and then over the mountain into Oakland. Even earlier, the route up the canyon to what is now Huckleberry Preserve was a cattle trail for the Spanish and Mexican ranches, en route to a landing at the mouth of Temescal Creek on San Francisco Bay. At the sharp curve at Eastport, the tracks immediately crossed over Pinehurst Road on a bridge. The right-of-way then headed down Redwood Canyon on a ledge just above Pinehurst Road, progressing southeast past the small community of Canyon. The line then turned north to Moraga past St. Mary's, and thence northeasterly through Lafayette, Saranac, and the valley past Walnut Creek and to Concord and Pittsburgh. Some of the right-of-way through Contra Costa County is now used by the BAT system to Concord. At Pittsburgh, the tracks ran parallel, adjacent, and south of the Santa Fe and the Southern Pacific Main lines, then dropped down, turned north sharply, and went under the SF and SP through an underpass to almost immediately reach the SN Ferry landing on Sweetwater Bay. The Pittsburgh side ferry landing and depot was called Mallard by the SN. The ferry boat carried an entire passenger train across to a north side landing near Sweetwood called Chips on Chips Island. From here the line proceeded north across an extensive marshland on a long trestle. After the trestle, the tracks continued north through farmland past Montezuma, Rio Vista Junction, Creed, and on to Dozier and Yolano before continuing on the 4-mile-long Lisbon trestle into West Sacramento, then entered the city of Sacramento by way of the M Street Bridge, and later by way of its replacement, the Tower Bridge, which is still in use. At West Sacramento, just west of the Tower Bridge, the line to Woodland left the southbound main line and headed west. The SN progressed through downtown streets onto I Street to reach the substantial column 2-story brick and stone Union Terminal on I Street, between 11th and 12th. Union Terminal, also used by Central California traction trains to Stockton in the early years, is now gone after use in the 1950s-1960s as a grocery store. Downtown Sacramento streets, particularly east and south of the Tower Bridge, carried many SN and Central California traction tracks. In 1913 a spur was built that connected Rio Vista Junction to the town of Dixon to the north, but it was unprofitable and was abandoned after a year or two. Freight service from Oakland to Lafayette ceased on March 1, 1957. Overhead wire and tracks were removed and the Shepherd Canyon Tunnel sealed. The former roadbed from St. Mary's College through Lafayette was converted to the popular Lafayette-Moraga Trail. The following year, freight service only extended from Walnut Creek to Sacramento. The ferry, Ramon, was removed from service in 1954, so SN, through parent Western Pacific, had to obtain trackage rights on the Santa Fe from Stockton to Pittsburgh, where SN trains could reach SN tracks and freight shippers in Pittsburgh and Concord. When the Union Pacific absorbed Western Pacific, SN obtained further trackage rights on the Santa Fe, which extended to Port Chicago, where SN had a small yard. Thus, Pittsburgh trackage was removed in the early 1990s. At Pittsburgh and north of Sweetwood Bay, including the northward turn under the SF and AMP SP to the Sweetwood Bay shore, the track Rio Vista Creed is still shown as SN. At Rio Vista Junction is the present California Electric Railway Museum, an active electrified track. Sacramento to Woodland Branch. The electrified Woodland Branch line left the Oakland-bound main line at West Sacramento and ran 16 miles straight west toward Woodland. The track proceeds across a very long elevated wood viaduct bridge over the wide Yolo floodplain to enter Woodland and go down Main Street to the Woodland Opera House, where the interurban cars turned around. Today Sierra terminates shortly before East Street, several blocks east of the Opera House. The Woodland Terminal was a unique mission-style structure and was recently reconstructed. The Sacramento-bound interurban cars exited the terminal onto Main Street through a unique archway in the station wall. Sacramento to Marysville to Chico. For the Sacramento depot at present-day Terminal Way, the SN's north end ran north up 11th Street to a northern electric-built girder bridge crossing the American River and then proceeded to Rio Linda. The line continued to E. Nicolaus, then Marysville, where it crossed the Feather River into adjacent Yuba City, split off the branch to Colusa, then went on to Live Oak, split off the branch to Oroville, then to Gridley and to Chico, where it terminated. In Chico there were yards and primary shops. From a junction just northwest of Yuba City, another branch line ran west to Meridian and Colusa. It crossed the Sacramento River at Meridian on a narrow combined rail and vehicle bridge. From Yuba City to Meridian the track ran alongside and north of the Colusa Highway, California Route 20. In 1992 this track and unusual Meridian Bridge were still in use and provided the SN with the Southern Pacific Union Pacific interchange at Coluso. As of 2009, Google website maps still show the former SN trackage in most areas alongside Route 20. Terminals and stations. Sacramento's first interurban terminal was at 8th and J Streets. Sacramento's two other interurban lines, the San Francisco-Sacramento and the Central California attraction, had separate terminals. Pressure from Sacramento to stop loading multiple car interurban trains on city streets led to construction of a terminal for all three in 1925. This produced the impressive two-story columned brick Union Station along I Street between 11th and 12th Streets. Trains left I Street to circle behind the terminal to one of four tracks for passenger loading. The station burned in 1972 and was then torn down. The SN Mission-style terminal at 30-mile distant Woodland was unusual in that the trains from Sacramento went through an arch in the station wall to reach a rail yard in the rear. This terminal was close to the Woodland Opera House, unique for such a small town. Technical information. Electrification. Because of interconnection with the key system, SN cars had to operate under a number of different electrical standards. The north end was electrified at 600 volts DC, the nationwide standard trolley and interurban voltage at the time of construction. Trolley wire and trolley poles were used only in urban areas. In the open country, the line used a solid, uncovered top-contact third rail. Cars built originally for the north end could not operate south of Sacramento. The south end was electrified largely at 1,200 volts DC until 1936, after which it operated at 1,500 volts, with areas of 600 volts in Oakland and Sacramento. The interurban cars had to use a pantograph rather than the trolley pole on key system rails and over the Bay Bridge. The key system used a covered top contact third rail over the bridge. Because of the key system's third rail, cars that could traverse the whole system had to have the third rail shoes removed, since the top contact shoes would have fouled the key system rail's cover. They were normally added or removed in Sacramento. Such all-line-capable cars were switchable between 600 volts and 1,200 volts operation. They could also operate at half power at the 1,200 volts setting on 600 V overhead. The SN's South End high-quality electrification used catenary rather than a single trolley wire, leading to the eventual exclusive use of pantographs rather than trolley poles south of Sacramento. Catenary allows the vertical supporting poles to be spaced farther apart than if a single suspended trolley wire is used. Plus, it is better for pantograph operation at speed due to stability. Cars and trains. Sacramento Northern offered dining service aboard parlor observation cars Bidwell, Sacramento, Moraga and Alabama. The Alabama had been built in 1905 as the private car of Pacific Electric Railway owner Henry E. Huntington and was purchased by the SN. This elegant car operated on the Sacramento Northern from 1921 until destroyed in 1931 by a fire caused by a short circuit in its coffee maker. Sacramento Northern named trains operating between Oakland, Sacramento and Chico included the Comet, Meteor, Sacramento Valley Limited and Steamer Special Sweeney Bay Crossing and Ferry Plant Bridge. The Oakland, Antioch and Eastern needed to cross Sweeney Bay, and chose to dissipate between West Pittsburgh and Chips Island, a gap of 2,600 feet. The bay saw heavy shipping traffic and thus a high-level drawbridge with long approaches was required. Construction began in 1912. The estimated price tag was $1 $1.5 million and construction time was estimated as 2.5 years. This would have delayed the opening of the railway, and so an alternative plan of a ferry service was implemented as a temporary measure. Construction of the bridge stopped in May 1913 after construction of the pier on the Contra Costa County side, because of a shortage of funds. The railway, not meeting revenue expectations, never did restart construction, and the temporary ferry service became permanent. Car ferry service. The railway was one of only two interurbans to operate a car ferry, and was the longer and more ambitious of the two. The first ferry constructed, the 186-foot bridge, it was constructed of wood in San Francisco and launched in July 1913. It was destroyed by fire on May 17, 1914. After unsuccessful experiments with an unpowered barge, the railroad rented car floats from other railroads in the area and commissioned a new steel ferry from the Lanteri shipyard in nearby Pittsburgh. The ram was constructed entirely from flat steel plate to save time, and had no curved surfaces on its hull. It was double-ended with a central raised bridge in the typical car float style. Power was by a 600-horsepower distillate engine, one of the largest constructed, which was insufficient to counteract high winds and currents in the bay. 3 tracks were installed on the deck, all long enough to carry 3 passenger cars or 5 freight cars. All 3 could not be used at the same time. The central track overlapped the other 2, and either the single central track or the 2 outside tracks could be used, depending on load. All tracks were equipped with powered trolley wire. The ram was retired in 1954 after a Coast Guard inspection determined that the hull plating was no longer in a safe condition, and it was scrapped locally. Bridges and viaducts. California Route 20 crossed the Sacramento River at Meridian on a bridge also carrying the Sacramento Northern line to Colusa. The tracks were in the center of the bridge and the 2 highway lanes were on the sides. It was replaced in 1977. The SN had 2 very long wood viaducts that crossed the Yolo floodplain.